Welcome, and thank you for joining us today to celebrate your legacy. For those of you who do not know me, I'm Gayle Temkin, the very proud chair of the board of the Jewish Community Foundation. I'm so happy to be here today with all of you. You're here today because you have made a legacy commitment to keep our community flourishing for generations to come. You believe in our community, you believe in what we're doing today, and you believe in what we can do for the future all together. Over the past 2 years, with special thanks to the excellent training from the Grinspoon Life and Legacy program, we are all together. This program was overseen, directed, administered, and launched by the Jewish Community Foundation, our local synagogues, Jewish agencies, and day schools. We received, get ready, 322 legacy promises from 236 donors. Many of our Life and Legacy partners who are here with us had never asked or received any legacy gift before. Many of the promises we've received are from people sitting in this audience, all of you. We applaud you for your forward thinking, for planting seeds, and for future, and for your generosity. Can I just ask all of you who've made a legacy commitment to please stand? Just what I thought. Thank you so much to all of you. We estimate that these promises, your promises, will mean $10 million in future gifts to our Jewish community. Let me say that again. $10 million. That's incredible. After only 2 years, we can say that we have $10 million in future gifts directed to the Jewish organizations that we all love and support. However, this isn't new to us. The Jewish Community Foundation has been doing legacy business for the past 50 years, and we want to recognize everyone who has made a commitment to our community, even before this exciting initiative. That's why we're here together, to celebrate everyone who believes in our future. We're dedicated to Jewish tomorrows and have been planting roots in our community for the past 50 years. This past fall, the foundation celebrated our 50th, and we're excited to look at the future for 50 more years with so much strength and so much support. Every day I walk through the doors of the JCC and I see our mosaic, our community's mosaic. It reminds me that this is our celebration. In addition to celebrating you and your legacy, we're here to gain a bit of perspective, a bit of inspiration on how to live a life of legacy. While we're all here together, we're thrilled to be here with Rabbi Daniel Cohen. I want to thank our event co-chairs, Robin Landau and Melissa Weinstock, who will introduce Rabbi Cohen in a few minutes. I'd also like to thank and recognize Alana McGilpin, who's trying to run away from the door right now. We're also here tonight to celebrate partnerships. Our community has amazing organizations that support each other and their missions, and the different ways they engage and support their members, their families, their students, and their clients. The foundation is an active partner with every single organization in our Greater Hartford Jewish community, and we're so proud to work in this space together with professionals, volunteers, and donors. We're grateful for a supportive community, and we want to celebrate that too. Another partnership we want to celebrate is with Harold Grinspoon's Foundation. With Harold's vision and with the Grinspoon Foundation staff and creativity, Life and Legacy has transformed our community and has created a culture of legacy that will impact us all. As Rabbi Cohen says in his book, every day is your opportunity for spiritual greatness. Make every day a masterpiece. There is no person that is meant to do exactly what somebody else is meant to do. We are all unique. We are all created in God's image. All of us are born with the capacity to leave a mark in this world, to enrich our relationships now, and to lead a life of inspiration. At this time, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Ron Critt, National Director, Life and Legacy of the Harold Grinspoon Foundation.
I learned an important lesson from the conference we just had. Keep your notes separate from other people's notes, and that should make the process a lot smoother. Thank you very much, Gayle, for introducing me. I'm very excited to be here. I thank you for including me in your celebration. Running Life and Legacy is a challenge, and the rewards, building a strong and vibrant Jewish Hartford, are more than worth it. Thank you to Alana and the Jewish Community Foundation for inviting me to this wonderful occasion. My comments are going to be brief. I want to mention all the wonderful partner organizations in this room and tell you about a recent legacy event I was part of. I hope it gives you an idea you can apply toward your legacy efforts. In this room, there are representatives from the Mandel JCC, so I know that Jews at every stage of life are being supported. With Emanuel Synagogue, not only are they serving conservative Jews, but enriching the lives of children as the home of the Children's Museum of West Hartford. Farmington Valley Jewish Congregation, I know you're serving a close-knit community in the Farmington Valley. Congregation Beth Israel, you're supporting a large community in West Hartford and have really embraced the Life and Legacy program. In this day and age, an organization like Charter Oak Cultural Center is so important as social justice and the arts need to be heard. It's all happening within a historic synagogue in Hartford. Congregation Kol Havarim is a cherished community in Glastonbury, connecting Jews east of the river. We have leaders from the Jewish Family Services, which is a necessity for serving the community. I've personally benefited from the services of the Jewish Family Services in Chicago, and although it's different states, I'm not lost on the impact. And while I've not been to your Solomon Schechter Day School, I know how they are all uniquely special and offer a warm learning environment. They're developing future Jewish leaders that will be in this room and take over from you guys moving forward. It's great to know temples that serve populations in every location of Greater Hartford, like Temple Beth Hillel and South Windsor, are in the program. Focusing on endowments is especially important for synagogues to continue to be a place of worship, connection, and community. Never forgetting the Holocaust and educating the next generation is one of the most important jobs, and that work will continue through Voices of Hope. And lastly, you have a wonderful partner in the Jewish Federation. They're a great resource for the community and each and every one of you. Prior to working for the Harold Grinspoon Foundation, I worked at the Jewish Federation of Chicago for 15 years. My job was to work with donors, market endowment gifts, and oversee our Life and Legacy efforts. Early on, I asked my boss to speak at a senior housing facility. And I wouldn't say I was laughed out of the room, but it was highly suggested not to do that. Now, fast forward to a few weeks ago. I was sitting at the Self-Help Home for the Aged in Chicago. They graduated from the Life and Legacy program, and their efforts started to lull. Their staff and volunteer reached out to the Chicago Federation to host an event, and the idea was simple. They had a really short agenda. It was me, it was a few people who had made legacy gifts, and it was just to have a conversation and a little panel and to inform people who lived in the facility and board members about their legacy efforts. And what happened over planning the event was nothing short of amazing. While organizing the event, 4 prospects signed letters of intent. The momentum that stalled was now invigorated, and they were engaging their board and donor base. And the more you talk about legacy giving, you know what happens? The more people learn about it, the more people want to be a part of it. At the actual events, I walked in the room, and I don't know, a show of hands, who's been stuck in Chicago traffic? All right, a lot of you. It's awful right now, though. I won't go into details, but it's really bad. So I get in this room, and I look around, and there's only 8 people outside of staff. So there's more people, but only 8 community members and board members are in the room. And right away, I'm thinking numbers, because we all think numbers. How many letters of intent did you sign? How's your formalization? How many donors are at events? Everything is numbers-based. But what's more important is the feeling. And the feeling in that room was amazing. It had all the feels. We had wonderful stories about how this facility had impacted people in the room, and it was really touching. Before the food came out, someone had signed a letter of intent while I was there, which I thought was amazing because that normally doesn't happen. but that happened. And then to move on, a woman came up to me and said, "This was so great, I'm going to talk to my children tonight." What I want this isn't really homework, but it could be. I want you to think about how you could do something similar in your organizations, in your synagogues, how you can do a warm, fuzzy event like they had and encourage these wonderful people to keep your program going. Sorry, my fingers are really dry. All right, and now I'd like to call up the co-chairs for tonight's event, Robin Landau and Melissa Weinstock.
Thank you, Ron. We are beyond excited to be here tonight to introduce our friend, our teacher, our mentor, Rabbi Daniel Cohen. We have known Rabbi Cohen since he started his rabbinic career right here in West Hartford, only a few blocks away at Young Israel. Both young new moms in 1999, with no family roots in West Hartford, I might add. Robin and I joined a study group with Rabbi Cohen and are forever grateful for the life lessons that we learned. Rabbi Cohen immediately touched my heart, and I consider him an angel in my life. Our connections are multi-layered and span close to 25 years. He is the reason I smile, wave, or say hello to every stranger I pass on the street. Although it can annoy my family at times, I hear his voice reminding me that you never know what someone else is going through. That smile, which takes very little for me to share, could mean the absolute world to someone else. And although he no longer physically resides in West Hartford, sadly for us, that hasn't stopped him from sharing his spark, his legacy, with our beloved community. I would argue that spending even 5 minutes with Rabbi Cohen, or reading, or rereading in my case, a few pages from his books will inspire you to be a better person.
So how lucky are we tonight to have Rabbi Cohen as our guest speaker at this Jewish Community Foundation's Legacy event. We love this Jewish community deeply and are proud to say that we are both legacy donors who believe strongly in supporting our community today and also in the future for generations to come. Melissa and I couldn't say no to co-chairing this celebration. Once they said it was Rabbi Cohen, that was it. As we know how inspiring Rabbi Cohen's teaching is, and genuinely can't think of a better speaker to cover the topic of legacy with all of you. Trust me, you are in for a treat. Popular motivator, mentor, and inspirational speaker, Rabbi Daniel Cohen's unique blend of authenticity, humor, wisdom, and insight helps anyone better navigate contemporary society and lead a life of legacy. Engaging in hundreds of end-of-life conversations and delivering thousands of eulogies, provide him, with a unique perspective on the essence of a meaningful life. Rabbi Cohen has served in the rabbinate for over 30 years and currently serves as senior rabbi at Congregation Agudath Shalom in Stamford, Connecticut, the largest modern Orthodox synagogue in New England. Rabbi Cohen is author of What Will They Say About You When You Are Gone?, Creating a Life of Legacy, and The Secret of Light, and speaks nationally on leading a life of legacy. He also launched the Legacy Academy, an interactive course based on his book to inspire people to live life at the highest frequency. He is currently working on another book with former NBA All-Star and Olympic gold medalist Allen Houston on the role of faith in leading a purposeful life. He is co-host with Reverend Greg Dahl of the nationally syndicated radio show, The Rabbi and the Reverend, and writes for CEO World Magazine. You must be so tired. He enjoys doing magic shows, playing sports, writing, searching for God, and living life with joy and ever-present smile. Rabbi Cohen and Diane are the grateful parents of 6 daughters, one of whom is here tonight, and 5 grandchildren. Please join us in welcoming Rabbi Cohen.
That was such a sweet introduction from the heart. I really appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. Gayle, thank you for your words, and Ron as well. Jacob, thank you for hosting also, and I see many wonderful friends, David, Henry. My heart is in West Hartford. This is such a special place for us. Shalhevet, who is our youngest, was actually born when we went to Denver. She was the only one of my daughters. She was born post-West Hartford, so she's enjoying the tour of the area now as well. And I want to thank you so much for having me here this evening. And Yasher Koach also on your wonderful work on life and legacy. I see Rabbi Rosen, wonderful to have you here as well, and Rabbi Brander. I'm sure there are other rabbis too, but it's wonderful to see. Let's give a big round of applause for the rabbis. So why don't we begin with the story. There's a 96-year-old man in Italy who unfortunately had COVID, and he was put on a ventilator. And he was on a ventilator for many months. Thank God he survived. But on the way out of the hospital, he was given the bill for a ventilator for one day. And he began to cry. And the doctor turned to him and said, "Are you crying because you don't have enough money to pay for the ventilator?" And he said, "I have all the money I need to pay for the ventilator. But I've been breathing God's air for free for 96 years. And now I know how much one day's breath is worth." We went through a time where we appreciated every single breath that we can take. But oftentimes in life, we're living in a place of crisis and not in a place of calling. If, God forbid, there is an awakening or somebody gets sick, everybody thinks about the fragility of what every day offers. But life is not meant to be a highlight film. Life is meant to appreciate every single day that we have and ensure that even though we can't stop time, we can slow down time and make it into something eternal. I just did an unveiling this past Sunday of a very special friend who unfortunately passed away at a young age, Dan Katz. Wonderful person. And I said to his family, I said, God gives us two blessings. One is length of years, and the other is length of days. We cannot determine how many years God gives us in this world, but God willing, it'll be many. But length of days, that means that I take every moment and don't ask myself, what did I do yesterday? But live my life saying, what am I going to do today that is worthy of future memory? How will I remember this time? And I said one of the great accolades for my friend was he may not have had length of years, but he had length of days. And the question for all of us is, how do we live our life at this greatest frequency? I remember one of the greatest blessings that I received was one somebody gave me on my birthday. I was very blessed. I was reborn on the day that I got married because I got married on my birthday. Thank God. And somebody said to me, they gave me a blessing. The blessing is from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. He says, the day that you're born is the day when God believes the world needs you. As you said, there's not a single soul and individual in this room that has the exact same mission as anybody else. We're not looking to be carbon copies of anybody. But the more that we realize that we are here because the world needs us, then when we wake up in the morning, our attitude is radically different. I want everyone to stand up for a minute, a little spiritual calisthenics. Let's go. All right, when you wake up in the morning, what are the first things that you say when you wake up in the morning? Very good. Well, Zig Ziglar would say, very good, Melissa. Zig Ziglar would say, a blessed memory. Do not look at your alarm clock as an alarm clock. Look at it as an opportunity clock. And when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you say is, I believe in God. Moda ani. Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3. I believe in God. And then what's the last part of Moda ani that we oftentimes forget? I'm not going to make you say, Melissa's going through the whole thing. Last two words, Rabbah emunatecha. What does that mean, Rabbah emunatecha? It means great is my faith, but here it is. It's not great is my faith in God, but great is God's faith in me. That if God invested me with life in the morning, God is saying, I believe in you. So when I wake up in the morning, I say, let's try it again. I believe in God. And God believes in me. And one other thing, did you know there's a statistic that 1 out of every 3 people is bright and beautiful in the world? Did you know that? So I want you to turn to the person on your right and say to them, you are one of those 3 people. Now I want you to turn to the person on the left and say, you are one of those 3 people. And then I want you to point to yourself and say, I am one of those 3 people. Now, don't you feel that the world needs you? Give it up for everybody in the room. That's it. Now you can be seated. You don't have to stand up the whole time. But the question is, how do we live with that awareness? How do we live with a sense of calling every day? I want to discuss or share with you this evening one of the principles in my book, which is also something that's reflected in the new book, The Secret of the Light, which is creating memories. You know, if you look back on your life and you ask yourself, what are the moments in your life that you'll never forget? The reality is that sometimes we never remember days, we remember moments. I have the privilege of officiating. I love officiating, of course, at weddings, but I also officiate at many funerals. And I'll sit with families and I'll say to them, share with me a memory about your mother or your father. And it's amazing sometimes what comes up. I was doing a funeral for an older woman, and one of the daughters was in her 50s, and I said to her, would you mind speaking at the funeral? Usually I always ask the family to speak. And she said to me, I really didn't have a great relationship with my mom. I'm not sure if I want to say anything. And then we got to the cemetery, and I said to her, you sure, do you want to say anything? She said, well, I do. There are 2 memories, and this is one that I want to share. I'll never forget when I was 8 years old. My mother came up to the bedroom, it was close to midnight, and she said, honey, get dressed. It's snowing outside. Let's go outside and play. And it was that one moment in her 50-some-odd years of unconditional love, when her mother was fully present for her, there was something now that she was remembering for the rest of her life. And one of the challenges is really ensuring that we are living our life creating these memories, because legacy, when you think about it, is certainly not only financial, but legacy is about somehow transmitting the values that are important to us so that they live in our children and our grandchildren, all we know, for multiple generations. And I want to frame the brief conversation tonight by sharing a Jewish idea, which is in the book, a second book that I called The Secret of the Light. Because to me, this principle helps us not only live life at the highest frequency, but creates an opportunity for us to anticipate opportunities for memory all the time. Jewish mysticism teaches us that at the very beginning of time, there was a tremendous light that God brought into the world. That light was so powerful that God had to hide that light, and the vessels in the world broke. And then God created humanity, because that light was hidden through all events and all time, to respond to that hidden light and bring a little bit of heaven down to earth in any moment. There is no moment in our life, no place, that doesn't have the opportunity to reveal some of God's light. I felt this at a train station in Philadelphia a number of years ago. I actually feel it a lot. But to me, this is really what it means to create that memory. And then I want to share 3 strategies with you. I guess I looked like a generous guy. I was waiting for the train, and an older fellow comes over to me, And he says, would you mind buying me dinner? And I said to him, sure, how about the Dunkin' Donuts over there? And he said to me, well, I prefer the Cajun food right over there. I said, okay, whatever you want. So I went to get him the Cajun food. And then after he's finishing his food, I had to leave. And I said to him, what's your name? He said his name is Sam. I said, Sam, God bless you. And he said to me, God has already blessed me. He sent me you. And in that moment, I knew that there was an opportunity for me to create an impact on him that would create a memory for me and that would create a memory for him. There are so many ways to live our life with this sense of creating memories, and I want to share 3 strategies with you tonight. One is the power of shared experiences. The other is the power of love. And the last one is the power of a smile and a hello. And I want to talk for a moment about power of shared experiences. And I got a question for you. Where's the portable mic? Is it around? I'll get it. So if somebody were to ask you, what is the age you're supposed to take your children to Israel on a trip? How old should they be? How old? Any age. Okay, it's interesting. The Talmud actually talks about this. And the Talmud says that if you can hold your child's hand, then you should take them to Jerusalem. Another rabbi says that's actually too old. If you can put your child on your shoulders and walk them to Jerusalem, then you should take them to Jerusalem. What's the message? The message is that people don't remember what goes into their heads, but a shared experience could be in their hearts for a lifetime. I think about this. There you go. I think about this a little bit as one of the reasons why I became a rabbi. I grew up in Atlanta, and Falcons fan, Braves fan, Flames of blessed memory. This isn't working too well. That's okay. And I remember in the 1970s, it was the height of the Soviet Jewry movement. And I remember my father taking me to an alley and holding my hand as he was walking to a rally. And I couldn't remember a word that people said, but I'll never forget they sang Am Yisrael Chai. And it was something that was planted in my heart to appreciate my responsibility to the Jewish people. I remember as a young, and that's, by the way, Shalhevet, it's true. That's actually why growing up, Shalhevet, come here for a minute. Let's bring up Shalhevet. She actually had no idea that I was going to bring her up. But I'm going to use her for something. I don't like to use my daughter, Shalhevet, but it's interesting. I really never had a chance to do this with her. Okay. It was for that reason, actually, that we were always very conscious of creating memories for our children. Whether it was rallies, we'd take them. Because we understood, and I know myself, I don't remember almost a thing that my parents told me at the Seder. But I'll never forget the taste of the food. I'll never forget the way the table was set and the way that it smelled, because you're creating these memories. One of the earliest memories that I have is something that I realize, it's one moment in time, but it's something actually that I was revealed in my grandson over 50 years after my father planted this memory within me. Now, Shalhevet, do you have any idea what I'm talking about? Okay. So I grew up in Atlanta. In Atlanta, it got hot, and in Atlanta, there were a lot of hills. And I would walk to shul. It was not that close by. And when I was getting a little bit tired, my dad would hold my hand. Let's do this, Shalhevet. You know what I'm going to say? She does. My father would say, when I was getting really tired, he would do this. He would say, Torah power. And he would just pull me up the hill. And I realized that he was planting a memory in my mind. Because he wanted me to associate Torah with power. And that's actually something that we did with you. Do you affirm? Good call. You can sit in. Let's give it up for Shalhevet. And we did that with all of our children. My father implanted that within me in the 1970s in Atlanta. I carried that forward into the 1990s and early 2000s with our 6 daughters. A few months ago, I was walking with my oldest grandson, Aaron. He lives in Teaneck, New Jersey. He's born to my oldest daughter, who's named after my mom, Sarah Malka. We have 3 grandchildren from her. And I'm walking in Teaneck, and he's holding my hand, and he says to me, Saba, that's what he calls me. He says, with grandfather, he says, Torah power. And I ran with him. And I realized that's the power of memory. That's a legacy. My father showed me well. He's just celebrated his 80th birthday. He's living in Israel. And I shared this with him. It's one moment in time when his heart was open to thinking how he could ignite that spirit inside of me. And it went from one generation to another generation. The memories that we share, and when we can find ways to create those memories, then we can ensure that those memories are burning, God willing, for many generations. The second idea is something that I like to call the power of love. And I'm not, by the way, I once said this in synagogue, and somebody said to me, you talking about Huey Lewis in the news? Maybe. Anyway, the power of love. And the power of love is that when we open up our hearts to people, those are moments that become unforgettable. A number of years ago, I got a very chilling email from my dad. He was having a triple bypass surgery in Israel at Shaarei Tzedek Hospital. And I remember like it was yesterday. I was sitting outside a coffee shop where I spend a lot more time. I see more congregants at coffee shops during the week than I do at synagogue. That's why I go to the coffee shops. And he sent me a very sobering email that said, it started with these words, if I don't make it, this is what I want you to do. You know, for the doctor, it's routine, but for the person who's going through the surgery, it's very intense. And I decided at that moment that I wanted to fly to Israel to be there with my dad when he came out of recovery. So I booked a flight that Sunday night. I arrived at Shaarei Tzedek Hospital as he was getting out of recovery. And I stayed with him all night. And he didn't have his shirt on, and there was a moment when it was a bit of a challenging moment. And he said to me a number of times during the night, can you wipe down my skin? Because he was feeling like overheated. And something magical happened. I touched his skin, which I hadn't done in decades. And all of a sudden, it brought me back to a moment when my father was teaching me how to swim and holding me as like a 5-year-old in the pool. And I realized that his love for me years earlier, now I had the opportunity to kind of reciprocate and share that love with him as well. The love of a touch and opening up your heart to somebody makes these moments eternal. Recently, a number of years ago, I was doing a wedding for a young woman who had lost her mother. My mom, as many of you know, passed away at a young age from a brain aneurysm when she was 44. And I find it's very special to be at a wedding because you see the dreams of the parents and the bride and the groom as they're walking down. And this time, I cry at weddings, but this time I was crying and I almost couldn't control myself because I remembered what it felt like for me to walk down the aisle only with my father, and this woman had to do the same thing. And there was a moment when I said to myself, do I open up my heart or do I hold it inside? Because people were wondering, why is the rabbi crying so much? So I decided to open up my heart. And I said to her, I understand how difficult it is for you to be present right now without your mom physically here. And I explained to her that I also went through that at my wedding, but I felt my mother's presence and knew that she was there. And I said, I know that your mother is present in this moment as well. And that opening up the heart opened everything for everybody who was there. And it's not only about in times of tragedy or difficulty, but also creating memories about opening up our hearts where we can be that person that an individual needs. A number of years ago, there was a story about a fellow who was a cantor at a very large synagogue in Germany. I read the story on Kol Nidre night. It happened to be, it was a big synagogue, and he finished Ne'ilah, the last part of Yom Kippur, and he was outside. Everybody had left the synagogue. And there was a young man who came over to him and said, what time is Kol Nidre? And he said, you missed Kol Nidre. It was last night. He said, no, I have to hear Kol Nidre. He said, well, you can come back next year and hear Kol Nidre. He said, you don't understand. The only time I went to synagogue was with my father on Kol Nidre night. My father died a number of years ago, and I promised him that I would never miss a Kol Nidre. So in that moment, the Chazan decided to open up his heart. He said, come back in the synagogue. There are about 1,000 seats in there. He put on his cantorial garb, he turned on the lights, and he sang Kol Nidre for this person. He said it was one of the most powerful Kol Nidres of his life. Now, God works in mysterious ways, because I read this story a few years ago on Kol Nidre night, and it's break on Yom Kippur at a Good at Shalom in Stamford. And there's a woman who is handicapped in our synagogue with her 2 children. And one of the kids said, you need to talk to my mom. I'm making this up. She said to me, our mother feels really terrible. She missed Kol Nidre last night. Well, the only other person in the lobby besides me and this woman and her children was the cantor. And I said to him, would you mind singing Kol Nidre for this woman? He said, I've never sang Kol Nidre on Yom Kippur afternoon. But he said he's going to do it. And you could see that when he began to sing Kol Nidre, she broke out in tears. And I don't remember a lot of breaks on Yom Kippur, but this was a moment because he opened up his heart that is unforgettable. We have the power simply by opening up our hearts and being fully present to create memories of a lifetime. I want to share one other idea with you. How you guys doing? Good? Not asking for a clap, but thank you. I got to share one other with you. You guys good on time? You okay? So I want to share one other story of opening up of love. For me, this is like also how no moment can be lost and the light is revealed anywhere. When we were at the height of COVID in March, we had a terrible tragedy in Stamford. Besides, unfortunately, COVID, there was a jewelry store where there was a botched robbery. It's called Marcos Jewelers, and the owner of the jewelry store was murdered. And the store had been closed for a number of weeks. And I was coming out the same coffee shop. I was coming out of the coffee shop. It's crazy. Coming out of the coffee shop, I'm getting in my car. You know, if you look back on your life, you'll realize that sometimes it's these little decisions that we make. Do we engage or do we not engage that can make all the difference in the world? And I saw a young man who looked like he was opening up the store. I didn't know him, but it looked like it was the son of the fellow who was murdered. And I said, you know what, I'm going to try to talk to him. So I went over to him, and it turns out it was him. And I let him know, I said on behalf of the Jewish community, I introduced who I was, that we're thinking about him during this time. And then I asked him, when is the store going to reopen? And he told me. So we had started at the height of COVID, something which is still going on. We started a WhatsApp group called Making Mitzvah Moments WhatsApp group, which is a way to mobilize people. There were people that were shut in, and we had deliveries of challah, and I said, okay, let me know when. So then I put out on the group, we're going to do a flash mob of kindness. So I told everybody, and we had about 200 people on the group. I said, I want you to go into the store when it opens up and just let her know you're thinking about her. You can buy something or not. It made such a difference in her life. She wrote, and we were very close. She's come to the synagogue. She's not Jewish. Her name is Annie. But she wrote me the following. She said, the kindness of the Jewish community has given me faith in humanity when I needed it most. And then it kind of played itself out even more. We were blessed with a granddaughter in Stamford a number of months ago. Her name is Ruthie. She's the daughter of my second daughter, Michal. And it was time for her to go out into her first walk in the world. Now, she's not walking, by the way. I put her in a stroller. And I decided I wanted to be very kind. Where am I taking her? So I took her to Annie. And I brought her. And Annie said to me, she said, I always still struggle to try to find life despite the tragedy that happened to me. And she said, I'm so glad that you brought Ruthie here. And then she said, wait a minute. And she said, what's the Hebrew word for life? I said, Chaim, L'chaim. She said, I have a necklace here, and I want to give it to Ruthie. And I took a picture of that. Because I said, I want my granddaughter's first memory to know that even just by being present, you can actually make a difference in somebody's life. So we have the power to create these memories through shared experiences. We have the power to create these memories through opening up our hearts. And the last thing is the power of a simple hello. Does anyone know that Judaism has a quantity of time, unlike any other faith, for 3.5 seconds? What's the Hebrew word for hour? I'm going to quiz you. What's the Hebrew word for hour? Sha'ah. What's the Hebrew word for minute? Rega or daka. Very good. Anyone know there's a term called chalakim? Anyone know? Everyone heard of that? When we talk about when the new moon is, we say it's going to be this amount of chalakim. I see Ted Zablotsky knows what I'm talking about. So there's 1,080 chalakim. Chalakim is 3.5 seconds. And it says actually in the Talmud that a person can earn a share in the world to come with just 3.5 seconds. Because a simple hello or a smile can change somebody's life. There's actually a source for this in the Torah. I'm not going to quiz you here. The source in the Torah is, you guys familiar with the story of Joseph? From Broadway or the Torah? Whatever, it's all good. So Joseph, he's in the pits. Then he gets taken out and he's serving in the house of Potiphar. Then he's accused of trying to rape the boss's wife, although she was trying to seduce him. He's back in the dungeon in Egypt. And literally, he could be lamenting his own problems. Who else is in the dungeon with him? The butler, what? The butler and the baker. And the most critical words that change his whole life is, he could have said, I'm feeling sorry for myself. He doesn't do that. I'll say it in Hebrew because it sounds better, then I'll translate it into English. Shalhavet, you know, right? Wow, pretty impressive. What's the Hebrew, Shalhavet? Very good. Madua penechem ra'im hayom. Why do you look so sad? And when he sees the face of God in another human being and realizes that rather than lament the darkness, he needs to increase the light, his entire world is transformed. He interprets their dreams, and then it leads to a whole different change in his life. I was at Sloan, thank God I was not. A friend of mine who recently recovered, thank God, from Sloan Kettering. And I said to him, can you tell me, what did you love about that place? You know what he said to me? What I loved was the doorman. He said, when I walked out of Sloan Kettering, the doorman said to me, I wish you good health, and I hope I never see you again. And it may be fun, it is funny, but here's a guy, it took him 5 seconds just to say that kind word to this person who he may never see again, but it becomes the lasting memory that's inside of him. And I believe that if we can be motivated to anticipate these moments, our lives will be radically transformed. I'm a big believer, this is an idea of the Baal Shem Tov, we all have what I call mobile mitzvah hotspots. Now, how many of you have a hotspot on your phone? Come on, you have a hotspot on your phone? Of course you do. Well, there's something spiritually called a mobile mitzvah hotspot. That means that if somebody comes into my orbit, God said that person is supposed to be in your orbit. But now it's up to you to unlock something, to make something eternal. Great example of this, I was in Jerusalem for our 5th daughter's wedding, Tamar, in November. And it was the day of my daughter's wedding. We were right around Emek Rephaim, those that know the area in Jerusalem. And my wife and daughters had to get their hair done early. I had no hair to get done. So I was at a coffee shop on Emek Rephaim, of course, doing my thing. And then I had to go back to the apartment in Jerusalem. And I got into the cab. And of course, you always have these moments in cabs, of course. Do you engage or do you not engage? So I'm a big engager. So I started to say to him in Hebrew, he was an Arab cab driver. I said to him, you know, today's my daughter's wedding. We started to talk, and then he started telling me about his family. We had a wonderful conversation. And then as we get near the apartment, he said to me, I was at this apartment this morning. I said, what do you mean? He said, this morning around 6:30 in the morning, earlier, 6 o'clock, there was 2 young women. Shalhevet was one of them. And she went with my daughter who was getting married. She said there was a woman there with a white dress, and I brought them to the Kotel, to the Western Wall. I said, well, I can't believe it. I said, you picked up my daughter on the day of her wedding because she wanted to go there to the Western Wall to pray. And all of a sudden, this huge light filled that cab. And we felt this connection, and I realized that that's where God wanted me to be. And I can only imagine years from now, I don't remember most cab rides, but that one I'll never forget because I was able to unlock a little bit of light inside of it. And we can find these opportunities, our lives will be living at the highest frequency. I have a couple more stories, and I know you got some questions. But I want to share a story with you. So we have, and this to me kind of sums it up, and then I'll give you a little blessing. So unfortunately, we have police officers, like I'm sure everybody does these days, in front of a lot of buildings, in front of our synagogue. And I'll always tell the members of the synagogue, I said, do you know the name of the police officer? It's important to know who they are, to thank them. So one day, it was actually the beginning of the holiday of Sukkot a few years ago. I said, what's your name? He said his name was Brett Gardner. Now, whenever I say that, people think it's the outfielder for the Yankees. It was not the outfielder for the Yankees. There's a Stanford police officer named Brett Gardner. And I said to him, thanks for being here today. It's a Jewish holiday. And I explained about Sukkot. He says, I'm Jewish, and I didn't know it was a holiday. I explained it to him, and then he says to me, he doesn't know I'm a rabbi. He says, and I didn't even have a bar mitzvah. I said, well, today's your lucky day. You just met the rabbi at the synagogue. I said, after the holiday, I'm going to help you learn how to read a little bit of Hebrew, and you'll come to our synagogue and have a bar mitzvah. And then he rolls up his sleeve, and he says to me, I can't have a bar mitzvah. I have a tattoo. I said, God doesn't care what's on you. He wants to know what's in you. And then he said to me, my mother will never believe it. I said, I'm going to have you in mind. So I get to the synagogue, and I have him in mind. It's Simchat Torah morning, the end of the whole holiday season. And lo and behold, who's there outside? Brett Gardner. And I say to Brett, today is your day. I said, I'm going to bring you into the synagogue. We're going to help you get called to the Torah for your bar mitzvah. He says, Rabbi, just don't embarrass me. So I'm involved in all these festivities, and then it's around 11 o'clock. I'll never forget it. One of the members of our synagogue faints. His name is Judd Love. And all of a sudden, who comes running in? EMS, and Brett Gardner comes in right near the sanctuary. Well, thank God, Judd was fine. But then I looked at Brett. I said, Brett, this is your moment. This is your time. So we brought him into the sanctuary. One of the young people in the synagogue said, Brett, here, use my yarmulke. He took off his cap. Another person gave him a talis, the prayer shawl. And then we were all around, and I helped him read the Torah. And then I said, Brett, it's your bar mitzvah. Let's dance. And he had his holster, and he was dancing around and all that. It's an amazing story, and we're still in touch. But I share for the following reason, this story to kind of close this piece. At the very end of our lives, God is going to show us two films. It's not Star Wars, and it's not Lord of the Rings. One film is entitled How You Led Your Life, and the other film is entitled How You Could Have Led Your Life. And how we feel is whether or not we've done our best with the life that God has given us. I can only think about what would happen at 11 a.m. on Simchat Torah. God is going to show two films. One is Brett Gardner standing outside minding his own business at the synagogue at a Agudas Shalom, and the other is Brett Gardner dancing at his bar mitzvah. The only difference between the two is 3.5 seconds and a simple hello that made all the difference in the world. My blessing to everybody here is that don't underestimate the capacity and the light inside of us that we are invested with every day to bring a little more of that light to create memories in the world. Because God will handle the rest if we put that light out there. And just one final story, and this happened actually with Shalhevet. There's a famous story that Rabbi Jonathan Sachs shared at a gathering of Chabad shluchim from all over the world. And he talked about there was a Chabad rabbi that went to a small town in Alaska because he felt there were some Jews there and he wanted to teach them. So he gets to the town, and the mayor of the town says there's no Jews here. The Chabad rabbi, of course, doesn't give up. And he says, I just want to talk to the classroom of kids. So the mayor says, feel free, talk to the classroom of kids. So he goes and he says to this classroom of kids, does anyone know anybody that's Jewish? And this young girl raises her hand and says, my mother is Jewish. And the Chabad rabbi decides, what is he going to say? And he says the following. He says, every Friday night, we as Jews light candles to remain faithful to the fact that in a world of chaos, we can create order. In a world of darkness, we can create light. And where you are right now in Alaska is the last place in the world that is about to light Friday night candles. And the whole world is waiting for you to light the Friday night candles. Now, I shared the story in Shalhevet's school in Jerusalem a couple years ago. And a young girl comes over to me, and she said to me, that woman in the story is my mother. She said, my grandfather was struggling where he was in Alaska. He was a furrier. And he went off to a place where there was no Jews. And my mother always tells me the story about this Chabad rabbi that came to her community and never lost faith in the light inside of her. And that light has grown, and now I'm here studying in Jerusalem decades later because he never lost faith in our capacity to bring a little bit of light into the world. So God willing, we'll all know every day not to wait for crisis, but to live in calling. Everybody here has something to contribute to make the world better. Let's not lament the darkness, but each and every one of us can increase the light, and light by light, step by step, will all lead our lives at the highest frequency and lead lives of legacy now and forever. Thank you.
Thank you. And wow, there's a lot of light and love in this room. So we have a couple questions for you about the new book, The Secret of the Light. What made you decide to write it, and can you share your journey in that process?
Sure. So actually, the genesis of the book started when after I left West Hartford, actually. I was visiting Denver, and they were taking me around to some of the kind of stakeholders in the synagogue, and I was in one fellow's office, and he said to me, when I die, will I be reunited with my parents? And I said to him, I believe you will. I said the souls are going to be reunited, and the souls live forever. And then a number of years later, he said to me, can you write a book that helps give people strength in times of loss and help them realize that the people that they've loved and lost are still present within them? So I went on a journey. I spent time in Jerusalem one summer to kind of understand the journey of the soul, and I was writing this whole thing. And then my agent, who was busy, who did my first book, she says, it would be a lot more interesting if you wrote this as a fiction book, because people will maybe come to it in a different way. Now, I'm not a fiction writer, and it was really difficult to do. I actually came up with a 60,000-word manuscript. My agent looked at it, I looked at it, he looked at it, and it was a mess. And then I had a few angels that kind of helped me work through it a little bit more. And in the end, it's really a book about giving people a sense that those that we've loved are still present with us, but also the main character in the book, who basically, he loses this is a bit of the autobiographical part, because I was able to write. It's a young man in his 20s who has a crisis of faith after his mother passes away. He loses faith in himself and in the world, and then he's meandering around Times Square in the 1980s, when Times Square was not a very pretty place, and he stumbles across a street sweeper who's a hidden mystic named Elijah. And Elijah sets him on a path to rediscovering faith in himself and in the world, and knowing that God's light can be found everywhere.
And what is the secret of the light?
What is the secret? Well, you know, it's interesting. I would say I might say it's not a secret, but I can't tell you.
Read the book.
Read the book. Well, it's based on this principle, of course, that I talked about, that there is hidden light that exists. I think most of us are not living, that one's most of us. Oftentimes, we see the world as just kind of in a tactile way for what it is. And we don't think about the divine design that goes into every moment of our life. But when we realize that nothing physical is without some sort of like spiritual essence behind it, which is when I meet somebody, and I truly I do my best to try to live this. Even if it's for a few minutes, if you can look somebody in the eye and you connect with somebody, you have now unlocked something which is truly eternal. And God is not asking, this is important, God is not asking for perfection. It's not like I'm doing this all the time. But God is saying, be mindful of the fact that you can create something holy in any moment. I'll just give you one idea from Lubavitcher Rebbe that I think about a lot. And it's actually very appropriate for this Torah portion this week. And you get your Devar Torah tonight, although everything was Devar Torah, sort of. But so he said when the Jewish people were in the desert, God told them to build a Mishkan. What's the Mishkan? The tabernacle. And the tabernacle was a lot of work. They had to unpack and they had to make everything. But here's my question to you. If you're staying at a hotel for one night, do you leave your clothes in the suitcase or do you unpack your bags? How many of you leave the clothes in the suitcase? How many of you unpack your bags? Now, I'll tell you what, I'm not pointing here, but it's interesting. I'll tell you where I'm going with this. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, if the Jewish people were only in a place for 24 hours, it was a lot of work to deconstruct and construct the Mishkan. But God said you still have to do it. Because never underestimate where you can bring a little heaven down to earth at any moment. Sometimes the greatest memories happen actually, on an airplane or you're traveling, and those are the moments. Because those are the moments when you actually can bring something which is eternal and some kindness into the world. So it's not a secret, but it's about leading that life with that sort of mindfulness.
Thank you. You talked a bit about the Elijah moment and the movement that you started, but how is that incorporated into the book, other than the character being named Elijah?
So one of the things that I think a lot of times we all struggle with is that when we are in a moment of whether it's grief or regret, we're kind of we're looking backwards, and we're thinking about what we could have done, what we should have done. The Elijah moment is a way to understand that the only moment that we have is the moment that we're experiencing right now. Every moment that I think about what I could have done, or when I'm actually with somebody, we all try, when I'm with somebody and all I'm doing is looking at my phone. Dinner is a great example, by the way. There should be no phones at dinner. Years ago, I would take my phone up to the bedroom to serve as an alarm, and then I realized, what are you doing? Why do I need to fill my mind with that stuff? Let me be fully present wherever I am and make something. So the Elijah moment is a recognition. Number one, to understand that in every moment I can do something kind for somebody, but also this idea that I may not be able to change the world, but I can change the world of one person many times each day. So that's kind of when he's living in the state of grief, he's feeling sorry for himself, the main character, and Elijah says to him, you know what, if you actually take your mother's values. They said about my mom, which I don't know if it's in the book or not, but somebody once went to Atlanta and said, can you tell me something about Sandra Cohen? And they said about my mom, whose presence I feel now and a lot, she was a stranger to no one. Imagine if we all led our lives, she was a stranger to no one. You're at a gathering and you find somebody, maybe you can be in a room of 100 people and you can have somebody who's not alone, or 1,000, depends on how we connect. So that to me is the most valuable lesson that he learns. And that. And by the way, the other thing I would say is that a lot of times people today, the world is nuts. I mean, people, I believe very strongly everybody should have a worry box. You know what a worry box is? Worry box is everybody here is allowed to worry 10 minutes a day. That's it. That's it. Find 10 minutes a day where you can get all your worrying out. And then use the rest of the day to do something positive. And that will change your mindset.
So, do you have anything else to add about why the book is so important for our world right now?
Yeah, I think it's related a little bit to what I said before, because I think there's a lot of despair in the world. There's a lot of feeling that the world is coming to an end. Who's going to? I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, whether it's the climate stuff, the political thing, and at the end of the day, the only people that we can change are ourselves. Doesn't mean we can't be politically active. We should, but we sometimes underestimate the fact that in every encounter, there's an opportunity to make the world a little bit better. There's a very powerful idea of Maimonides who says that we should always see the world as being equally in balance. And everything that I do can resonate in an eternal way and in a global way. We've all seen this where, somebody does one thing and then it leads to something else and leads to something else. So I think this is hopefully a book of empowerment. I said this in Stanford. I was talking to the mayor of Stanford about this. And I said this to the synagogue. There should be no reason that any community has to do food drives anymore. Why? Imagine if everybody made it their practice, and whenever you go shopping once a week, you buy something extra that day. And we were fully conscious of living that. Because that's what you do. I'm going to spend $3 to $5 in buying something, and we're working at the supermarkets to get stuff for the food pantries. So it's like, this is what I can do, but in aggregate, if we all begin to have that mindset, it really can make a transformative difference.
Thank you. We could listen to you for hours and hours and hours, but I'd like to call Jacob Schreiber.
Thank you very much.
Well, wow. Rabbi Cohen, thank you. Thank you for bringing some light to us, reminding us that each day is special. I was sitting out and standing out in the, in the reception, and how people will say how life, is returning to being so busy again, and we're just not ready for it. We need to slow down, and people are slowing down. Not necessarily the people in this room, of course. And to recognize that, before I just say just a few closing remarks, there's a lot of power and a lot of good in this room. So I would like to take a few halakim, a few 3.5 seconds to recognize the foundation professionals and all the Jewish professionals in our community. Would you please rise? I'd like to thank all our board members who are here and all the board members who are serving on our community's synagogues and agencies. Would you please rise? And I just have to single out one person, because you reminded me that there is one person in this room who I can say for sure lives the longest days every single day, and she does it for the community, for health, for good. Gayle Temkin, thank you for being our chair. So, first of all, the good news is, when you leave tonight, we will be offering you one of Rabbi Cohen's books and dessert that you can enjoy. So you'll enjoy at least reading a little bit, having some dessert, enjoying your evening, and slowing down tonight. Some events have one or two honorees. Sometimes we stretch it to 10 honorees. But what's special about tonight is every person in this room is a co-honoree, because we are celebrating you for what you have done, for the faith that you have put in the Jewish community and the way that we are going to survive and thrive for many years to come by making commitments now, by being charitable and generous, and by making afterlife commitments. So everybody here is a co-honoree. And together, we'll celebrate the other 150 to 200 people that have made a life and legacy commitment to our community. Now, I'd also like to offer you an opportunity to create, like Rabbi Cohen says, a lasting memory. Please go to our website. On the website, the Jewish Community Foundation website, you will find what we're calling the Book of Life. Once you're there and you see the Book of Life, we're asking you to enshrine your legacy commitments in perpetuity. It will live on the internet metaverse forever, and talk about why you've made a legacy commitment. This digital Book of Life gives you an opportunity in just a paragraph or two to let your children know, to let your community know, to let your friends know why you gave a commitment to the Jewish people and why you feel good about it. You can either write this down, and there's a whole form, or you can even put a picture of yourselves there, or you can even do a video so one day your grandkids will think that you're a legacy TikTok influencer. So please use that influence and consider asking one friend this summer, one friend this summer, this month, to consider giving a legacy, making a legacy commitment. If you just ask one, and we're able to get just one more from each of you, that will be worth another $4 million in afterlife gifts that's going to be there to ensure our vibrant Jewish future. Rabbi Cohen has told us that we all can make a difference, but we just have to act just a little bit. And if you need help, the foundation is here to help you. Catherine, Gail, Ilana, myself, we'll pay for lunch. And it'll be the best money we'll ever spend. So, on behalf of the foundation, the board, everybody here, Rabbi Cohen, and again, thank you again to our chairs. We wish you a great evening. Thank you. Go get a book and a dessert and enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you for being here.